I want to welcome everybody back to the Space Education Summit as we enter our final hour here. This is the fifth iteration of this event, and at every version of it, Frank has been our closing fireside chat closing speaker, and we happily happened on the tradition of pairing him with a dynamic partner that brings something else to the table as well. So we're excited to have Cristina Star here with us, and I'll give them both the proper introduction in a minute. But first, I want to once again acknowledge our partners, particularly for their help promoting the event, and call attention to the Aldrin Foundation and to SLU, in particular to Earthscape VR, which is, of course, Anahita's company, and Ignited Thinkers, where Gitika shares so much great content for students and young professionals in particular. But also to Club for the Future, Space Foundation, Weekend University, and of course, the Human Space Program for their help. And this was sort of born in the Human Space Program, hey, Frank? In
Yeah,
the Education Task Force 2 years ago.
yeah, it grew out of the overview roundtable, and we're incredibly proud of you and your team for keeping this going. And we just want you to keep going, and we're here to support you, Mark. You know that.
Thanks, Frank. And for everyone who is here, just one last iteration of our participant norms before we dive in. It's fantastic to have everybody here for the final session. It is definitely meant to be participatory. So I can see the text chat already moving along. So definitely great to have everybody in there. Leave your own thoughts in there, leave resources, ask questions in there. I'm sure Gitika and the others will get to it. But also feel free to use the raise hand feature, or just physically raise your hand, or to just interrupt, because we've got a nice kind of critical mass of people here for a large discussion, and not too many. Feel free to unmute and share, especially if you're invited. If you need anything, just use the help feature or ping Ron or I or Anahita, and we will try to help you out while Gitika is moderating. So thank you again, and good, almost a good segue there from Frank's comments, but stoked to have Gitika with us for the closing session. Thanks for working with us on this, and Ron, as always, fantastic to partner with you on this whole event. Kind of year round, it's great to have an excuse to meet up with you on Zoom. Same Anahita, just fantastic to have been doing this from the very beginning with you, and to have been in the roundtable and what were the task forces with you to begin with, where this idea was born. So thanks for working on it with me. It's definitely a passion project of mine. So excited to have such a great team. That said, let me introduce the Capstone speakers. I will start with Frank, actually, and then introduce Cristina. But Frank, of course, is the author of The Overview Effect, first edition in 1987, full of firsthand, our primary documents, his interviews with astronauts and their experience of the Earth from orbit. And as I said this morning, they tend to look down and see no borders and see no tribes, and see that we're all in this together in a relatively fragile ball of life, hurtling through the relative bleakness of space. But we're so glad to have Frank's work, and to be able to have his guidance, and that he has founded the Human Space Program based on a later book, the Cosma hypothesis. Well, and I suppose it was originally born in the Overview Effect, but we're thrilled to have him here. He's an author. He's been a professor at multiple institutions, including Harvard, for many, many years, and he's the founder of the Human Space Program. So we're thrilled to have Frank with us today. Thanks for joining us, Frank.
Thank you.
And Cristina is the founder of Cosmic Citizens Training. She also has a lot of experience as a scientist. Her original degrees were in physics and climate physics. Cristina, I was wondering if perhaps you just finished that master's that's in progress, or if that's still in progress in space policy.
Literally today, I just turned in my final research paper for all the coursework.
Awesome.
However, I begin my thesis on Monday. So
Hey, so it's getting there. I just wanted, with this time of year, I thought there may have been a change in the year. change in the air. But in any case, yes, congratulations on that.
Thank
So
you.
she has researched mass extinctions, climate change, isotope geochemistry, river biochemistry, observational astronomy, and her passion is training the capabilities and worldviews needed for healthy, aligned, ethical living on Earth and beyond. So that's what her company, the Cosmic Citizen Trainings, is all about. That's her role at SpaceKind. And I know we have a number of people who've been through the SpaceKind program here. Just on my little screen, I know Martina's done it and so many of the others. So fantastic to have Cristina representing that program here as well. And to have her here for a fireside chat with Frank White. Finally, her picture was on the previous slide, but I want to hand this over to Gitika Gorthi from Ignited Thinkers. I think Gitika has just finished her second year at Columbia, and we're excited to have her with us despite her busy internship schedule. So Gitika, let me hand it over to you, and I will actually stop sharing so that you all can be big speakers on Ron's screen as he records the session.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm very, very excited for this conversation because I was both reading and I have followed, especially Frank's work. And now I've learned about Christina's incredible work. And I see so much synergy, yet differences in both of their backgrounds. So I'm excited to dive into it. I will say my internet is a little bit bad in this dorm, so I hope I'm not lagging anytime. But so to start off and to kick off our conversation, I wanted to ask Frank a question. Obviously, we have this conversation every year, but I think it's important to start with asking about the overview effect in case there are new participants. And so, Frank, you have very famously coined the term the overview effect, and you've essentially started a movement in the aerospace sector to acknowledge the power of the mind during spaceflight. Could you explain a little bit about what the overview effect is to those who may not know, and the importance of understanding it for the future spaceflight missions?
Yeah, well, I would say it really is there are a multiplicity of elements to the overview effect. And that's what makes it fun. I'm always learning new things about what it is. But it all started with an experience that I had flying cross country, looking down at the planet, thinking about what it would be like to permanently live off the Earth. And I thought, oh, that person, whoever it is, would have an overview of the Earth and would see a lot of things we're trying to understand, like oneness. We're all in this together, as was mentioned before, no borders, no boundaries. And it wouldn't be something to figure out. You would just know these things, these philosophical concepts, really, ways of living, and you would experience the overview effect. That's how it began. It began, I suppose you'd say, as a hypothesis. And since there were no people living permanently off the planet, I turned to astronauts as proxies. And as I said earlier today, they confirmed a lot of what I was hypothesizing, but they also did not think of it as ordinary. They were somewhat shocked by what they saw. And as we talked about earlier, many of them cried. Excuse me, they had an emotional reaction. And now we're really looking at bringing the overview effect down to Earth, either through commercial space flight or virtual reality, or any way we can spread this reality of our situation. Our situation as a species is not what we experience every day. We don't experience being on an organic spaceship that is rushing through the universe. We experience being on a platform with the heavens revolving above us. And I've said before that the overview effect is about three things, if you want to boil it down. It's about the truth. It's the truth of our situation and where we are. It's about love of the Earth, and for many people, love of the cosmos. And it's about identity, beginning to identify beyond our national boundaries and identifying at least with the earth and maybe more. That's what it is as of today. Every time I interview somebody or have a meeting like this, I think, and it's also the following. But that's a good start for people who really haven't heard about it before or don't really have the origin story.
Incredible. Yeah. And I remember, I believe it was last time we were holding this summit, you said something that is very obvious, yet I never thought about it like that. It's like we're already in space. When we think about sending a rocket to space, we say it as if it's something external. And it's hard to visualize that we're already in this organic rocket ship, like you said. And it's just
Yeah.
a very, we had the astronaut panel this morning as well as in the past summits, and hearing their experiences about the overview effect is very beautiful. And Cristina, when I was reading your background, I thought what you were doing is preparing not only astronauts, but even people on Earth to unlock this inner self-awareness, and to start thinking about something a little bit deeper than just something that we can, see on the surface. So my question for you is a little bit about your journey first. You are a physicist, as Mark said, and I was quite fascinated how you use your physics background, and now you're the founder of Cosmic Citizen Training. So could you share a little bit about your journey turning from a physicist to the founder of this program, as well as currently, like, what was the inspiration for you to found Cosmic Citizen Training?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And hello, everyone. It's definitely an honor to be here by this fireside with Frank on this wonderful Friday. And my background is driven by the desire to understand the nature of reality and then like find a way to live in a good way from that. So I had two parallel paths. One was studying science in the most rigorous way possible. I explored and studied and researched the earth, because that's where we are. So there's like physics was at the foundation of everything, and so it allowed me to branch out into these other branches of science that at the time was like, interdisciplinary, and now feels like it's understood that that's a kind of what astrobiology is the mix of all of these things, including the history of the earth. But simultaneous to that, I found that science didn't have the answers to all my questions, and it couldn't tell me who I was or what the right way to live in harmony was with the rest of the world. So for that, I turned to Eastern mysticism and became a Buddhist at a very young age, and studied meditation and the more esoteric teachings of that lineage. And so after doing science full-time for about 10 years, I left my PhD program and went full-time into the more spiritual work, and became spent time at a monastery, and really wanted to dive into understanding consciousness and identity, and what that path of change is for myself and for other humans, what the similarities are as people progress along certain paths of their own growth and identity. And so I ended up having a company actually called True Education. So for 7 years, I taught and collaborated with about 20 other teachers, where we provided in-depth programs for folks, and those were in person and online. And it was delivering a whole suite of practices and worldview and lifestyle changes that could deliver people from kind of being stuck in their own stuff to being aligned with something that felt bigger than themselves, and feeling able to access like happiness and joy. And that to me was the most meaningful experience I ever had, was to provide that and to share and facilitate that while I continue my own personal growth journey. And I felt a call to return though to science and to my roots and space. I felt the beckon of space, and began a master's in space policy. And I clearly saw this vision that the people, as we move into space, need these practices, you know, that we need to be able to be the best humans that we are capable of being, and that there's no room for the kind of BS that we take for granted here on Earth, in the workplace, in the personal sphere, and that I had this kind of outlined clear path for folks. And so the ideas came and the curriculum was born, and I'm still in process of putting some of those programs out there, but that was the birth of Cosmic Citizen Trainings. And it is an adaptation of the curriculum that I created to be more for space technology and science professionals, and to really directly address the challenges on Earth and in space that we're dealing with right now. So that's my non-traditional career path, but it feels like I've landed in a place where I'm integrating and using everything.
I absolutely love that. And I think it's, for every, individual, whether they're yet in the early stages of their career or later, can take a lot away from that nonlinear career path. And something I noticed, and for the audience as well, feel free to like add questions to the chat so we can ask those as well to the panelists. But as you both were speaking, I could see that you both are very focused on connecting with the inner self and the mind in both space as well as on Earth. And so could you piece together, this is a question for the both of you, for how you can, what are the applications to the overview effect on Earth, and why is it important to bring both, the self-awareness aspect to both space travel as well as everyday life here on Earth? How do they connect together, and how can they, I don't know if that question comes together as well as I wanted it to, but how do you piece those two together towards like a similar purpose? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, I'll take a shot at that because when I was listening to Cristina, I had an image. I'm doing a lot of archiving of my work now. I want everything that's been part of my journey to be available to everybody. We actually did get a copy of the overview effect on the moon. Remember the one that crashed? And they also sent a lot of little water bears, these little microscopic creatures that can survive anywhere. And anyway, I'm archiving on my own. I'm not going to send it anywhere. It's going to be somewhere everybody can get to it, hopefully online. But my point is, I was going through a box of material, and there was all of this personal growth material that I got into. I'm a meditator. I have practiced Zen, and I trained to be a psychotherapist. And Cristina, a lot of what you were doing, I was doing probably in a similar time. And that was an effort to get to the inner life and have it reflect outward into the outer life. And it really did lead to the overview effect. And some people have commented to me, I can tell from reading the overview effect, you've done a lot of personal growth work, and it's true. I think it comes back to two important goals, and I could hear it in what you were saying, Cristina, is that we want to use the overview effect and the large-scale space migration to improve life on Earth. And that's not just space-based solar power, that's a shift in consciousness. And, the overview effect does shift consciousness. And one of the characteristics that's not talked about a lot is when you have that experience in outer space, you see that you're part of something larger than yourself. And that is a characteristic of every spiritual practice and even every religion. You realize you're part of something much bigger than yourself in space and time. And the other thing that I think we're all concerned about, I've called it no regrets space migration. 500 years from now, I don't want my descendants to look back and say, we have to fix the mess they made. You know, we're doing that now. We're looking back, and fortunately, we've awakened to the mess that was made. We're doing what we can to fix it. However, it'd be a lot easier just to prevent that consciousness from being transported off the planet. And I think the kind of work Cristina is talking about, it will help life on Earth, but it will also, I hope, prevent the negative attributes of human behavior from being part of what we bring with us when we depart.
Incredible. And Cristina, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Frank hones in on the key elements, which is, well, each individual plays a significant role, and that it matters what we do every day, and what we do every day stems from our own belief system and our value system and our sense of awareness. So how much are we aware of? What do we know? And who do we think we are? And what do we think is important? And those are things that guide the entire trajectory of society, and they guide the trajectory of individual lives, and they guide the trajectory of societies and families. And you know, it's like a pretty famous quote that an unexamined life is not worth living. Like that's Buddha. We seek to understand who we are and what we want, and build from that really intentionally, right? And so this provides us, as we move into space, we really are beginning a new era. And that's what Frank was alluding to. Like, this is a new chapter in humanity, and it matters who we are. And it matters that we are being really deliberate about who we are, and that we're taking the time to look in the mirror and look at our history and see the way that certain things that we value that show up really unconsciously in our systems and in our lives are perpetuating the destruction that we have on the planet. And that if we don't address those personally and then within our systems, then we're just going to take it out there. And we've done some pretty significant damage to the Earth in a short amount of time. And the Earth is a system that is able to balance and correct itself. And none of the other planets that we're talking about have those kinds of systems in place, especially not the moon. So there's the capacity for repercussions to be much swifter than we've experienced here. And so it matters. And the overview effect is, it's like a poetic and incredible thing that exists, that to leave the Earth, you then get to see the big picture. And then with that can start to make the changes to what's next, right? But then you come back down and you run into the same system that's running in the same way. And that's where it really makes a impact to be able to have support and have tools for understanding, now that you've had an identity shift that's significant, how do you act in a world that isn't reflecting what you know to be the truth?
It's amazing insight. And there was a question in the chat related to this, but before I get to that one, there was another really important aspect of what you were saying, the both of you, related to the environment and space. I think there's this huge disconnect. I mean, we have many conversations, from what I've noticed in the space sector, related to how space is for Earth, space is for humanity. But when you ask someone who may not directly be into or involved or knowledgeable about what's happening in the space sector, they're like, oh, NASA, whatever they're doing is taking money away from the environment. It's taking money away from what we're trying to do here to protect our planet. And there's this disconnect. So how can we work together, not only as an industry, but just as a community, to connect the environmentalists with the space advocates and kind of bring those communities together? And this is a question that anyone can take up.
Yeah. Well, Cristina, we're ready for this one, I would say. A little shout out to Jared Angaza, who with the Human Space Program really kicked off the idea that we've got to bridge this gap between the people who call themselves environmentalists, the people who call themselves space advocates. We've started talking about making space for the environment, which is an interesting double entendre. And the idea here is to shift our language again. I mean, one thing we do need to talk about is language, and how we language things makes it real. So I've started saying, look, there are space-bound environmentalists and earth-bound environmentalists, but we're all environmentalists, and we have to all be environmentalists. We have to start there. We can't have this gap. Now, that's kind of asserting something that confronts a truth, which is there are people who really think the way you said, Gitika. And, you know, we have to let them know, as people who are very interested in the larger picture, we're not abandoning the Earth. We love the Earth. Our intention is to help the Earth by having large numbers of people depart and industry depart, and maybe giving the Earth a break from all these people. And specifically, Human Space Program and Moon Village Association and Cosmic Citizens Training, we did something specific. We actually had a webinar workshop that Cristina moderated, and we did bring together people who had a variety of opinions, but were all concerned about this question. And we're now looking at ways to carry that forward. And to answer your question, that's a first step. And I think we just have to confront the situation and do what we can to change it. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but I have a colleague, a friend who's very, very bright. And Human Space Program team had a long conversation with him about this. And we really saw the mindset that any effort, it's not just money, but any focus on leaving the Earth is a distraction. It's a way out. It's not serving the cause. And this is someone who's very committed to the movement and is not yet convinced that there are two kinds of environmentalists, that he still sees this gap. I think the answer is what it always is. It's communication and education. And I do believe we have to work on it, because the alternative is actual total opposition to what we want to do. And we haven't seen much of it yet, but it's building. And so it's necessary, it's practical, and it's really what we want. We want to all be environmentalists.
I think that's very important. What you said about language, and I think language is the first step in, with communication, and being able to change that language that we're using to not just create these separate groups, but showing how we are one working towards similar aims, and try to convey that with the words we use very purposefully is very, very important. And I'm sure, Cristina, you have much to add to this same question.
Well, at the heart of it is an acknowledgement that the earthbound environmentalist has a tremendous passion and concern. They're like being able to acknowledge that, yes, there is a major problem. I don't agree with how we spend our funding. I'm more going to go for, can we spend less on defense and more on the environment than the 1% of space, our budget that goes to space. So making sure that I feel like, hey, I'm also very concerned about the earth in a real way. But it's the difference between direct thinking and systems thinking, linear thinking and big picture thinking. Because when I explain to people the overview effect, thank you, Frank, for providing the language and the framework for that. And I explained to people the technology that's required to create a sustainable presence off-world is the exact same technology that's required to create a sustainable civilization on the planet Earth. People suddenly understand. So I've had a lot of these conversations where, so long as I can succinctly share in a couple of minutes that that when you take people who are tremendously resourced and you put them in a tourist experience where they're going up and then suddenly having the overview effect, that identity shift is going to affect how they spend their resources when they're back on Earth. And we see that happen over and over again, and that matters. People understand, oh, wealthy people do have a lot to contribute in an outweighed fashion. And then the other piece is, saying, the technology that we need to build, the recycling technology, the water purification technology, and the biotechnology, what we need to understand about biological systems and ecosystems so that we can understand how our microbiome is going to live and evolve with us in different like gravitational fields. This is something that science and technology will bring us so much closer to having a balanced life on Earth. That being said, I think that there's it's not a given, and we have to try with that in mind. It's not like we just do whatever we want as we move into space and all of these spin-off technologies will trickle their way down into fixing the Earth. I think that we have an obligation, and being involved in the space industry, to work to ensure that our plans include addressing the current and ongoing issues and needs, and that's a part of the business plan.
If I could build on what Cristina said, in any conversation where there's division, it's good to look for where do you agree, right? So I've spent some time, and my colleagues and I have spent some time dealing with a question that earthbound environmentalists bring up a lot, which is, okay, I get it. It's great for people to go experience the overview effect, and usually they come back and they're more environmentally oriented and all that. But is it worth it if you destroy the stratosphere or, the land where the spacecraft takes off? And quite honestly, I used to say, that is a real problem, I'm sure. I don't know much about it. And I can't be saying that. I have to say, yeah, I've studied that. It's an issue. And we have to hold Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic and the different companies to task for that. And also, we, as Cristina said, we have to say, yes, I care about climate change. And if you didn't know it, I don't think it's a hoax. I believe climate is changing and humanity is part of that. and so on. In other words, if we just kind of skip over the concerns of other people, they're not going to listen to us. They're not going to take us seriously. So we have to say, yeah, I'm on your side. We have to, we have to do everything you're talking about. And we've got this other piece that we'd like to offer you, and a different way of seeing it that we'd like to offer you.
Yeah, I'm being a sponge right now, and I'm sure everyone listening is like a sponge. I'm just the language that both of you are using to talk about this common ground and the way of approaching these conversations is something that all of us need to and are growing and learning from. But I think incredible insight, and not just with the environment as you were mentioning, but even with other, sectors in the field, like with medicine, which is something I'm particularly passionate about. I know recently there was a meniscus manufactured in space and a lot of other organs that are trying to be developed in space, which is it's more easily done in a microgravity environment compared to here. And so scientists are looking to possibly in the future bring this to scale and replace organ transplants in the way that they're currently done. And so just the way space is creating this innovation and challenging us and trying to find this common ground between individuals who may not see themselves in the space sector, but showing that there is a common ground with both of our approaches is very important, like you both said. And one of the questions in the chat, and it's a little bit deviating from what we were just speaking on, but someone asked, when we are on other planets, how will we be able to have people who do not have a lot of discriminatory tendencies that haunt our behaviors on Earth? So they're asking about once we go and expand and do continue with our space migration, how do we ensure that the discriminatory tendencies, behavior, and the separation we tend to have sometimes because space is very political, how can we take that in a different direction as we continue to migrate to space?
Well, if you're talking about something that's cultural and personal and built into systems, right? Because discrimination exists on all of those levels. And at the heart of it, it stems from a fundamentally human quality. So I don't think that we're gonna, at least in the foreseeable future, all ascend and become humans that don't have innate discriminations. And the way to work with that is to guide as many people as possible who are going to be going into space and who are a part of the culture that are sending people to space, that they have worked on their own biases, that they've worked to deconstruct the discrimination that exists in the systems that are operating in the businesses that they're running and in the selection criteria that they're creating for who goes off world. All of these values and these biases exist, and they will exist in future generations. But there's a certain amount that's learned. And what you can teach is self-awareness and an understanding of your own psychology, so that what you can do is identify your own unconscious biases and be willing to share them, not have them be shamed, so that you can work on adapting that. So it's a cultural value of not having discrimination and having a sense of equality and equal opportunity that's going to drive that, and then specific practices that are a part of the culture. And it starts with everyone here. It's not a far off thing, but I can envision a future where where a young child as they learn, how to rage for the first time, can also learn that doesn't mean that everyone with red hair does that. Like hurts you.
Well said. I think it speaks to an urgently important point that's not getting enough attention, and it falls into Cristina's area of space policy. It also falls into the area of space ethics. There's a surge of interest in space ethics. Michelle Hanlon has formed the Institute for Space Law and Ethics. And I see ethics papers everywhere about the migration, how's it going to happen, how's it going to work. But what it comes down to is who gets to go. It's kind of interesting what we accept. We've accepted for years. Well, NASA can decide if you get to go. We were talking about age limits. We were talking about, I mean, I have been discriminated against by NASA because I don't have the right degree. It's not that it's not because I'm not a superhuman like, the astronauts. That's not it. My training is social science. I mean, Cristina gets to go because she did physics. That's not right, I think.
I don't get to go either.
Oh, okay. Well, I feel better now. I'm just kidding. My point is, we just accept, well, NASA gets to choose. Well, okay, fine. ESA recently was proud to announce that they were flying a disabled astronaut or differently abled. But anyway, now let's get beyond the government. Elon Musk at this point gets to choose who goes to Mars. Is that okay? I don't think so. On the other hand, under the current situation, he is the person who gets to choose. I had an interesting question come up once when I was talking about this, and the human space program, our mission is an inclusive, sustainable, and ethical evolution of humanity into the solar ecosystem. And somebody once asked me, well, what does inclusiveness mean? Let's say we could build 50 O'Neill type communities. Does each one of them have to meet our current ethical ideas about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Would it be okay for one of those communities to be all white, or one of those communities to be all people of color, or on and on and on? I mean, the overall picture would be diverse, but is it okay for each community to discriminate? I still haven't really answered that. I just put it on the list, how we don't have any mechanism for deciding who gets to migrate. And we have it on Earth. We have a system, not so much do you get to go, but do you get into where you want to go? And I'll just stop there because obviously this is critical and it needs a lot more attention.
Definitely. And I think those definitely opens up a door of more questions that I'm sure everyone is thinking of right now. And another point I wanted to mention is when we talked about discrimination, something I remember from last year's astronaut panel, I know Ron was on it as well, and they were talking about how when they flew to space, they didn't see boundaries, and it gave them, they were saying every politician or every leader should, have this opportunity to go to space because you get this new insight into humanity. And I'm not saying, the discriminatory feelings that humans innately have will instantly disappear, but I think space provides us, and especially traveling to space with some of the astronauts' experiences, it brings humanity together and makes us realize really how small we are, but how connected we are together on this planet. And so as we move forward, I think that perspective will have to keep being reiterated as we answer some really difficult questions. And something else, another question in the chat that Oren asked was, how do we hold the space companies accountable regarding the negative impact on the environment or various individuals? And I think, Frank, you kind of talked a little bit about this when it came to Elon Musk, but just in general, I mean, how do we hold those space companies accountable for their actions?
I'll toss that to the space policy person.
Yeah, because I was going to say, this is a policy question, essentially. In America, we operate in a market where only regulation and environmental policy is going to steer the behavior of large companies. So there, what we have and what we see is that at least in the US, the FCC is in charge of licensing and ensuring that the space companies are operating within the larger international sphere of agreement. And what's interesting to me, and as part of my research, is that we have this language in the Outer Space Treaty about space being for the benefit of all humanity, of all humankind. And then we have something also that's called the Benefits Declaration, which is an additional treaty that is a part of the Outer Space Treaty system. And this similarly addresses that we have made, that nations have made an agreement to hone our space interests towards being of benefit, and recognizing that they're not just going to be a benefit to a few or even to the nations that are doing them, but that they need to be of benefit to all the nations of the world and all the peoples. Anybody who's not familiar with the Benefits Declaration, short read, really inspiring. And but these are large documents as far as being very general. And the way policy works is then each nation gets to make its own policy that tries to interpret and solidify this in certain ways. So what we are at right now is a time when in our environmental policy and our business policy has yet to catch up with the space industry. And that's why policy is a very exciting place to be for space, because to hold them accountable, they need to be essentially either like breaking environmental laws that already exist, or there needs to be new laws to constrain what they're capable of doing. And then they adapt, right? I'm also, of course, I love appealing directly to companies with solutions for what is possible to, but when you've developed a particular type of rocket propulsion, and that rocket propulsion punches holes in the ozone layer, unless you this is SpaceX, this is what we have with our NASA, like the SLS and everything, also same kind of impact. It needs to there needs to be pressure from the environmental side of things, essentially. So I think that if the question really is how do we, right, and people here, there is a lot of work to be done in lobbying for environmental policy and space governance, and so people can pay attention to that, and also learn about the negative impacts that space has right now, that the industry has right now. And this ties back a little bit to our conversation where it was like, how do you have that environmental conversation with people? I think that entering a conversation where you're willing to learn and be wrong, is really important. And because we really do have a lot to learn about the direct and indirect effects of expanding our industry. And there's an opportunity to cause a lot of harm if we're not properly constraining companies in industry with environmental policy.
Yeah, I'd just add to that, there is the rise of, I believe it's ESG investing, the whole idea of investing in companies that reflect your values, and space companies really can't do what they want to do without investment. So the investing community ought to be made aware of these concerns. And I agree that, the environmental community is powerful in America anyway. We do have to remember that governments also have to be held accountable. The very ones that we want to regulate are also often creating problems. So, we have to hold them accountable, and we do have a system for that. And we always have to look beyond the United States, really. We're very focused on US because it has, it has so much power in so many ways. But African nations are now very interested in what, the space environment can mean for them. They're not going to sit by and watch, and they need to hear from the environmental perspective. China, I really don't know much about their environmental consciousness, to be honest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, it's not that dramatically different from the problems we have on Earth. And one analogy I like to use about what we're trying to do at the Human Space Program, I say, on Earth, we have developers and we have planners or regulators. We've got a lot of developers who want to go off the planet and make a lot of money. And we don't really have enough planners. We'd like to be planners. And the plan would have to include environmental concerns. Because planning on Earth increasingly does, and it should. So, it's a lot of work to do. And I think in the early days, I was part of what we call space advocacy. Just, we got to get out there, that's where humanity's got to go and all that. Where I think we're beyond that now, and we have to be responsible. We have to be responsible, not just for advocating, but also for shaping. And that's a new role for the community in reality. It really is.
Yeah. And for the educators and young professionals who may be listening, and even just for industry professionals now, from your experiences, both of you have very diverse experiences in the sector and educational backgrounds. So from your experience and knowledge so far, where do you think that space migration and this topic that we're talking about related to space advocacy is going to be in the next 10, 15 years? How should students or young professionals now who are entering this sector, what should they work towards, and where can they see maybe a problem that will arise 15 years from now? Like, where do you see the future of this conversation being? If we were to have this summit 15 years from now, where do you think the conversations would be at, and where would you think, we as a society would be at?
Oh, Frank, I want you to start with this because you were the space philosopher and the futurist here, and I want to hear what you have to say about this before I throw my hat in the ring.
Yeah, I'll just build on what I said at the Space Tourism Conference. I was on a panel with Mark and Kirby and Elizabeth. And the question was kind of like what you just asked. I'm sorry, my space dog is here. I'm trying to calm her down. Yeah, so basically I said, I can't really see that future very clearly because of the rapidity of change at so many different levels. One of the wild cards is artificial intelligence, Let me give you an example. I've never thought of this before, and I don't mean to bring in negativity, but we don't know how artificial intelligence is going to look at or evaluate what we want to do off the planet. And there's a physicist, astrophysicist in England, who has said that the reason we haven't contacted any alien civilizations is they didn't make it through what's called the Great Filter. The idea that at certain points in a technological civilization's evolution, there's a barrier and they collapse. They can't get through it. Elon Musk has said, my whole life is about getting humanity through the Great Filter. This particular person thinks that the filter is AI, that nobody gets past it. No civilization, knows how to cope with it. I don't think that's true, but my point is artificial intelligence could be the greatest thing since sliced bread as far as migration off the planet, or it could play a role we can't even imagine. So my advice from that panel was I would tell my grandson, my grandchildren, actually, I just said this in our panel here, cultivate certain qualities. And this is what Christine is talking about: mindfulness, resilience, openness. I think I would focus on that, in that almost anything I would tell you about what's going to be happening in 2030 could be wrong. And just one other example, we don't even have to deal with the idea that AI is the great filter. I wrote a book maybe 4 or 5 years ago about artificial intelligence. There's a lot of good stuff in it, but it's obsolete because it was pre-chat GPT. And, I think that, before the fall of 2022, I don't think anybody was predicting the importance that technology would have for us. And that's just one example of the variables. There's so many other variables. And I think the other advice I'd want to give, and I know we're coming to the end here, from my own experience of my journey, I would say 3 qualities or 3 pieces of advice I'd like to give is: don't give up. Whatever your passion is, whatever it is you want to do, persist. Don't give in. Don't listen to anybody who says you can't do that. And don't ask permission. I had no permission to do what I'm doing that would get me here to this meeting today. Nobody gave me permission. I just did it. And so I would advise young people, as they look at our future out there, keep those 3 things in mind.
Yeah, I love it. That reminded me, not a single high school or college counselor would have ever been able to define my trajectory in any way, or where I landed, which is like in a field that didn't even exist really then. Right. And I echo the same sentiment, which is that 10 to 15 years is there. We will see too much change to be able to predict, and I think that is a quality that is new, and that will test us. You can't underestimate the amount of change that is coming on this planet, in the ecosystem, socially and politically, as a reaction to that. The change that the space industry and the understandings that we gain from venturing out will impart. As well as that big question mark of AI, right? And there's just a lot happening, and I agree that the need to focus on what makes us human, which really is means a direct experience of connecting to yourself and connecting to those around you and connecting to the earth, and to continue to learn and grow, and having this growth mindset and openness and curiosity and a sincere desire to be of benefit. And, to me, I think that one of the most admirable and effective traits that anybody can cultivate at any age is enough resilience to be grounded inside yourself and help while the shit's hitting the fan. Like the hurricane came in, are you like did you just like lose your shit, or are you able to gather yourself together and help your neighbors? and not in a way where you're repressing your emotions and like have to deal with PTSD later, but in a degree where you can actually really show up for yourself and other people. And because that's the trait that we are going to need more than anything on this planet. And then that's required for any space community. Like if you think of astronauts, you think that's kind of the thing that they have, right? Things are really stressful, and at any point in time, you need to be able to respond and to be of service to those around you and to save lives. So yeah, that's the thought that I would leave us with is that we can work on ourselves to be strong enough to help others.
I love that. Yeah, you both are sincerely from the bottom of my heart, very, very inspiring. And I'm sure everyone in this call agrees. I think both of your journeys haven't been linear, and I don't think anyone's journey is ever, except for a few exceptional individuals. Most journeys are not linear. And I think the advice of just following your passion, even if it combines many degrees or many skills that don't currently exist, and being open to the change that's rapidly occurring in every sector is really important. And so thank you so much for leaving us with that, ending this conversation with that, or I should say pausing this conversation with such an incredible thought as we continue. And I will hand it over to Mark, who will kind of close our session today.
Thank you, Gitika.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Mark.
Thank you, Cristina and Gitika.
Thank you, Gitika. Just fantastically moderated, and thank you, Cristina and Frank. Just great discussion and a wonderful note to end on. Gitika, I love the idea that we're just pausing the conversation too. That's I'm absolutely going to steal that.
Yeah, I didn't like the word ending. That sounded very, very sad. And I was like, we're not ending this conversation. So I was like, okay, I need to replace that word.
That's fantastic. It's ongoing. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to bring this to a formal close and share a few resources, especially for people who maybe weren't here earlier in the day. I want to point people toward Frank's books, particularly The Overview Effect, which is in its 4th edition. I think it's over 600 pages. That you probably first 200 something, 250, right, Frank, is the original content, and there's a ton of primary documents in the back, if you will, from interviews with astronauts. And then Star Sailor is a book that Anahita and Frank wrote for kids and tries to communicate many of the same concepts in a sort of fantastical story. So I want to point you towards both of those books. Naturally, I want to point you toward my book as well. It's a little more academic, but focused on preparing students for the growing space economy and for humanity's future in space. Frank wrote the foreword. Thank you, Frank. So it's also sort of Frank's book. And the free and open education resource, which is the curriculum that I developed with Space Prize, based on the experience I had writing the book. So you guys can find that at spaceeducation.org. It's a really massive collection of resources and original material put together by the team that we worked with. If you're interested enough in those things or in the experience you've had today, I have a graduate style class. There are continuing education units available. It starts July 9th. We go through 12 modules. So that's once a week. Typically, we'll meet on Zoom. Sometimes we run it as a twice weekly thing over six weeks. But the next one is starting up July 9th. Could be a great way to spend your summer for professional development if you're an educator. I often have enthusiasts and professionals from other fields as well. So you would all be welcome. It's just arieslearning.com/course if you're interested in that. We also take teachers out into the field now. I work with Dr. Kirby Runyon, who's a astrogeologist. He worked on the New Horizons mission. He has mapped the moon and Mars for scientific missions. And we take teachers out into the New Mexico desert to visit landforms analogous to places you would find on the moon and Mars and elsewhere in the solar system. So it's a tour of the solar system without leaving the planet Earth. We also get a full day tour of Spaceport America, including the Virgin Galactic facilities. So if you're interested in that, it's just arieslearning.com/Earth and Space, as in Earth and Space Science Standards. I, of course, want to highlight the Aldrin Family Foundation, their signature giant maps of the moon and Mars, their student satellite program, and their summer camps. If you guys are interested in that, reach out to me at any time. Mark at aldrinfoundation.org is great. You can also find their work at aldrinfoundation.org. And our partners at SLU, who provide remote access to a network of telescopes around the world for students, so they can actually order images of celestial objects like the Orion Nebula pictured here. And there's tons of instructional opportunities, learning opportunities baked right in. So check it out at slu.com or ping me. I'm happy to help you guys with that as well. Finally, I want to invite everybody here to, and anybody who's watching the video, to join the Space Educator Network. It's a group on Facebook where we can share resources and network. If you want a short link there, it's just spaceeducator.net. We'll get you to the Space Educator Network, and I encourage everyone to be prolific there in sharing and commenting. It's fantastic to see the folks who are. Once again, thank you to all of you as participants for being here, particularly those of you that have stuck it out at this point in the day. It's pretty fantastic to see how many people are still in the room. And thank you to all of the speakers and panelists, and to my co-organizers, again, Gitika and Ron and Anahita. Just fantastic to work with you on this project. Well, we're going to wrap it up as close to on time as we can at this point, but happy to stick around and chat for anybody else that is as well. Thank you all.
And quick shout out, Mark. Thank you for being the heart of our group, pulling us together and doing all of this. It's always an honor to work with you, Ron, and Anahita to put this event together.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gitika.
And Mark, yeah, you wouldn't happen without you. Fabulous. That's a huge task that you take in putting and bringing all this together. So we all thank you.
Thank you, sir.